I purposely brought up 9/11. I for a long, long time, we've tried. I just generally try to avoid a discussion of it because it's one of the, it's like going down the rabbit hole, and everybody has an opinion. But I just want to say because people call in about it on a fairly regular basis, and if you want to do that today, and we've got a lot of calls on a lot of other topics, we don't have to, but I look at the situation, and having spent 17 years researching the JFK assassination, work that Lamar Waldron and I did that produced 2 900-page books, one of which has been made into an hour-long NBC Discovery Channel documentary called The Men Who Killed Kennedy, and the other of which is slated to be made into a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro by Warner Brothers. So, somebody has taken us seriously. 50 years after the fact, more or less, I can tell you that it took a long time for us to figure out what had happened. And in fact, we had a pretty good inkling of our idea of what happened with the Kennedy assassination about 12 or 15 years ago. We started out on the assumption that the CIA was involved, and we ended up disproving ourselves. And we were not trying, we were not engaged in a tautology. We were not trying to prove our theory. We were kind of suspicious of that, or just speaking for myself. I can't speak for Lamar, but speaking for myself, I was suspicious of that. And, the kind of Oliver Stone theory. But or the military-industrial complex or something like that. And what we ended up not just figuring out, but I think, proving fairly clearly, particularly now that we've got the FBI tapes of Carlos Marcello confessing to it, that it was the mob who killed Kennedy. And they did it because prior to the Kennedy administration, there had never been more than 15 prosecutions of organized crime in this country in any one year. Nixon was in the bag with the mob. The mob was doing just fine, thank you very much. They were blackmailing Hoover. They had the best of all worlds. They were blackmailing Hoover about his homosexuality. And then Bobby Kennedy comes in, and he has over 700 prosecutions of the mafia in the first year of the Kennedy administration. He was putting them out of business. And how does the mob kill people? They do big public hits. It's like, the two guys who, in my mind, were responsible for it were Carlos Marcello and Santo Trafficante. And Trafficante was the guy who was involved in going up to New York City and killing Albert Anastasia in the barber chair in New York City, walking with a machine gun and just, that's how the mob killed people. But anyhow, my point is it took us all these years to get to that point of talking to people who were inside the mob, people who were inside the CIA, people who were inside the Kennedy administration, talking with Dave Powers, who was one of his closest aides, long conversations with Dave. He gave me an autographed copy of Life magazine. I sat in Jack's rocking chair as I was talking with him, the one from the Oval Office. Dave Powers at the time was the head of the Kennedy Library in Boston. I think we nailed it down. But it took 50 years. And our work was done on the shoulders of all kinds of people. Anthony Summers and Albert, he was one of the very first, and many, many other people who had, Mark Lane, everybody's work that had preceded us. We didn't do it out of a vacuum. In fact, the House, the House Committee on Assassinations, they concluded 20 plus years ago that the Kennedy assassination was the result of a conspiracy. Most Americans don't know this. There was the Warren Commission that said it was a lone gunman, and then, a couple of decades later, the House of Representatives convened a committee, looked into this, and actually came to a formal conclusion. So this is the official statement of the United States government. The most recent one was that Kennedy was killed as a result of a conspiracy, and that Oswald was not working alone, and in fact could not have been working alone. So anyhow, after all of that, we think we figured it out. And having been through that, and having, Lamar probably has 2 million pieces of paper in his house. And megabyte after megabyte after gigabytes, terabytes of computer files and interviews, and we traveled all over the world. I went to France trying to track down Michael Merz, who we thought was one of the assassins. It just went on and on and on. So I look at people who are trying to figure out what happened on 9/11, and I just say, good luck, God bless you. because I don't think we really know. Now, as I said, my personal opinion, and this is subject to change, because when we started looking into the Kennedy assassination, I thought it was the CIA and the military-industrial complex, and I no longer believe that at all. But my personal opinion, based on no personal research, just reading everything yes, I've seen Zeitgeist, I've seen all the movies, I've seen the engineer's report, I've seen it all. My personal opinion is that George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, knew something was up. Now, I based that on Sandy Berger personally telling me, one-on-one. Sandy Berger had been the national security advisor. He had Condoleezza Rice's job in the Bill Clinton administration. Personally telling me that when he left office and handed that office over to George W. Bush in January 2001, and handed his office off to Condoleezza Rice, that he personally told Condoleezza Rice, your number one priority has to be Osama bin Laden. Just a few months earlier, Bill Clinton had tried to hit, or maybe a year earlier, Bill Clinton had tried to hit Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan with 3 cruise missiles, missed him by 20 minutes, and the Republicans went to the floor of the House of Representatives, I believe it was Newt, it could have been somebody else, to ridicule Bill Clinton for that, saying, oh, he's trying to wag the dog, he's trying to take our minds off of Monica Lewinsky. And so what we know is that, and this is like public record stuff, is that in January of 2001, when the Bush administration started, George W. Bush gave 2 jobs to Dick Cheney. One was to head up the Energy Task Force. And what was he doing in the Energy Task Force? Dividing up the oil fields of Iraq. Larry Klayman from Judicial Watch filed a Freedom of Information lawsuit and actually got the paperwork. You can find it online. That's what Dick Cheney was doing. He was meeting in secret with oil companies, no environmentalists whatsoever, oil companies from around the world, and they were deciding which oil fields in Iraq were going to go to which countries and which companies. And then the second thing Dick Cheney was given as a job as vice president was to be in charge of the Counterterrorism Task Force, which he never bothered to convene until September of 2001. So Cheney took his eye off the ball. Condi Rice took her eye off the ball. And George W. Bush was down in Texas, and finally the CIA was running around, Richard Clark talking about how they had their hair on fire. They saw this coming. Again, they weren't certain what it was, who it was going to be. They just knew it was going to be big, and it was going to be New York or Washington, and they got this from British intelligence, Russian intelligence, Israeli intelligence, not to mention our own intelligence. CIA sends a guy down to Crawford, Texas, with a memo titled Bin Laden determined to strike inside the U.S. and makes sure that George Bush reads it, because they were starting to assume that he wasn't even reading these things because he wasn't doing anything. And I think he was just scared to death. He was in Crawford. He was way away from Washington and New York. He knew something terrible was going to happen. He probably thought it was going to be a Tim McVeigh kind of thing, blow up a building. And he was afraid to go back. So he took the longest vacation in the history of the U.S. presidency all the way back to George Washington. And then when that was over, he went to Florida, the state that his brother was running, and said, hide me, Jeb, until something terrible happens and it's over. And Jeb did. And then after 9/11, which I think could have been avoided if Dick Cheney had done his job, if Condi Rice had done her job, if George Bush had done his job, after 9/11, he shamelessly used it to invade a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. That's my opinion.